This is Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Yomi, and once again, we like to dedicate all of the learning as an incredible schus for all those, both stuck, both fighting, both in Tsar, all the terrible situations in Eretz Yisrael. P'siyat d'shemaya, the schus ha'Torah should be megin on all of Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. We're holding on, really, Nun Chesam and Aleph. We finished on Zayin and Beis, but I'd like to take a moment to go a little bit back. We ran through the final Gemara slightly quickly, so let's go back. Let's go back about 10 lines from the bottom. Hopefully this will not set us too far back. B'siyat Shemaya will be finishing this second parak today. And let's pick it up from Ella Amar Abaye, which is another source for the din that Chulan Shenishchatu Be'azara is Asar Behana. And therefore, if one is Mekadesh and Isha with such chulin, the Kiddushin would not be chal. So Elam Abaye Mehach says Abaye, we're again 10 lines from the bottom, from the wide lines, in Zayinim and Beis, Ella being the first word. Mehach, V'shachatu, V'shachat Oisai, V'shachat Oisai Tlasakra Yisiri. We have 3 psukim, Matam Aloymar, Lefi, Shenemar, because the Torah says elsewhere. When the distance is when you are far and you shecht from a far place, which teaches us, which teaches us you're not allowed to shecht b'makom karev within the chatzar of the azara. Prat lechulen shelo yishchatu ba'azara. This comes to exclude that chulin is not allowed to be shechted in the azara. So that's mikar number 1. But now says the Gemara, we know further. So from kiyarchik mimcha makam, we know chulin shenishchatu ba'azara is forbidden. Ainli ella. Excuse me. Continues the Gemara. Ve'inli ella timimim hariyun likarei. From these psukim, you only know a tamim, that which could have theoretically been brought as a carbon. Minayin le rabbis balei mumin. How do you know to even include a balmum? How do we know even to include an animal which is not fit for a carbon? Marbani is balei mumin. Shkein min hamachshir. Says the Gemara, you know why I'm going to include a balmum? Because it's a min hamachshir. Within that type of animal is fit for a carbon. Menayin the rabbi says a chayo. So how do I know to include that you're not even allowed to shecht a chayo, which is not a min hamachshir, a wild animal which never would be allowed to be brought as a carbon? Marbani is a chayo shiva shchita kibehema, because the process of eating the chayo is the same as a behema, the same shchita. Menayin the rabbi says a oifois. Tamlam v'shachat tu v'shachat oisai. V'shachat oisai. So the 3 times are going to teach us not only is a balmum forbidden ba'azara, not only a chaya, not only and as well oifais. Says the Gemara, yachol. So says the Gemara. So far we only know that it's aser. But what are we trying to learn out? We're trying to learn out not only is it forbidden, is it aser to shecht chulin ba'azara, but we're trying to learn out that there's an Isser Hana, that you can't even get benefit from it. Says the Gemara at the very end of the lower lines, Yachal, I would think, Lo Yish Chait, I would think that you can't shecht in the Azara. But Ve'im Shachat Yemoter. But maybe if you did it, you'd be allowed to get benefit, or more than benefit, maybe you'd even be mutter to eat it. Talmud Loimar Ki Yarchik Mecha Makam V'Zavachta Ve'Achalta. Mashata Zayveach Barakai Makamata Eichel Viata Eichel Mashata Zayveach Makim Karoi. But you can't eat that which you shecht inside the Azara. So that's how we know you can't even eat it. So again, we're really now retracing our steps. Because once we have this threefold drasha of v'shachat tu v'shachat oisai teaching us it's forbidden, now we can go backwards and we can say that all the other psukim teach us not only is it ulcer, but you can't even eat it. Says the Gemara, this is only an animal which is a tam, which is pure, which is theoretically fit to be brought for a carbon. As we turn over to Nun Chesam and Aleph, but says the Gemara, Haruyun li Karev, Minayan the rabbis. How do we know to even include Bali Mumin, Marbani Bali Mumin Shekain Min HaMachshir? Says the Gemara, the same sequence of events. Minayan the rabbis Achaya, Marbani is Achaya, Shiva Shchita Kebehema, at least it has a Shchita. Minayan the rabbis Oifais, Tamla V'Shachatu V'Shachatosai V'Shachatosai. Yachol Yishchait V'Im Shachat Yachchenol of Meiklavim. But now says the Gemara, great, but maybe you could at least get benefit from it. Maybe you could at least throw it to the dogs. Talmud Loimar. Says the Gemara, no. How do we know you can't even throw it to the dogs? Because Talmud Loimar says the pasuk with regard specifically to a treifa, not to chulin sheneshcha tu ba'azara. A treifa says the pasuk l'kelatash tichon oisai. Oisai. Dafka, specifically this case of a treifa, the halacha is ata mishalech liklavim. V'ayata mishalech chulin shenishchatu be'azara. And that's going to be our mekar, that is our source, that chulin shenishchatu be'azara not only is asar ba'achila, but it is asar b'hana as well. Continues the Gemara. Ashkachenu mar Yehuda l'Rav Yosef. Ul Rav Shmuel, Brei the Rabbi Bar Chano. Mar Yehuda. Excuse me. Says the Gemara. Mar Yehuda found Rav Yosef and Rav Shmuel, Brei the Rabbi Bar Chano. Tahave Kaimei. Apischa Tvei Rabba Amar Lahu. And he said to them, Tani, we learned in our Braisa, Mekadesh, V'petach Amar B'basar B'chalav, V'chul Shenishchu B'azara, Rabbi Shimon Oimer, Mikudeshes, V'chacham Oimer Mikudeshes. Alma, what do we see? We just had a whole lengthy daf and a half proving that all of these items are Asar B'ana. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Alma, we see Chul Shenishchu B'azara, L'Rav Shimon, Lav deraisa. According to Rav Shimon, they're not deraisa. There's no isra navar. Aminu will ask you, is here Rav Shimon? I'm a chul shechlu ba'azara. Yisrfu v'chein chay shechlu ba'azara. So what's going on? Number one, we see that Rav Shimon holds it's not asar b'ana. Number two, we have a stira within Rav Shimon himself. Ishtiku. They don't have an answer. Also, Kamei de Rabba, they came from Rabba Amar Lahu, and he said to them, Palga Kaminchu. Half of Palga, the one who argued a Kaminchu, he stumped you. He has a good kasha. In the case where Rav Shimon said that indeed, if one is Mekadesh with any of these entities, it is Mikudeshes. Do you know the reason? Not because Rav Shimon argues and holds that in all cases you could get hana. No. The reason why is Mikudeshes Kegoin. Shenishcheta v'nimseish treifa. Because the case is that this animal was shechted and found to be treif. Rav Shimon l'taimei titanya hashoichet es ha-treifa v'chein hashoichet v'nimseish treifa zeh v'zeh chulin ba'azara. Both of them were shechted ba'azara. Rav Shimon matir b'hana v'chachamim oisrim. So specifically in this case, in the case of one shechted a treifa, or if one shechted and it's found to be treifa, and they both were shechted in the azara, that's the case that Rav Shimon is meikol, we'll call it, and says it's mutter b'hana. And in this case, even the chachamim argues. And the reason being over here, let's take a moment to look at Rashi. Rashi's a few lines up. Rashi says, "Ubechulin ba'azara, kosavar yisura lav daraisa, lo yisur shchitasai, v'lo yisur anhaasai, v'lo darish b'yichal k'malka." Rav Shimon argues on the whole drasha. Ela midrabanan. Rav Shimon holds the whole isur is in isur derabanan. Why? Dilma aslamim Kiddushin nifsalus lulachar shchitahin shaloi nizrak daman. You might think that there was a psol in the shchita. Komeshani minayu v'asli hanas mekachim so nizrak daman. You might come to benefit from kachim, and that's the reason why Rav Shimon holds it's only nisid rabbanon. But lemaisa you could get benefit from it. Continues the Gemara, quoting the end of the Mishnah. We're at the two dots, about 20 lines down. Nun chesam and aleph. Machron v'kidesh b'demehen mekudeshes. If any of the entities in the Mishnah, he sold them, and he was mekadesh with their money, the halacha is they are mekudeshes. Ask the Gemara Minolan, from where do we know this? From the fact that by avodas chavim the Torah says v'yisachayim kamayhu, that the money should be chayrem just like the avodas zara itself, meaning aser b'hana. Kol shata mehaya meimena hareyu kamayhu. Anything that you benefit from it is like it, and it's aser b'hana. B'chlal t'chol yisur b'Torah sharu. Says the Gemara. So that's dafka by avodas chavim we find such a din, that everything that comes from it is aser b'hana, but seemingly everything else in the Torah, or the whole list in our Mishnah, if you sell it, it would not become aser b'hana. Ask the Gemara, or the classical kasha, v'neilef mina, why don't we learn from avodas kachavim to teach us that in all scenarios, that in all forms of iser hana, that which comes from it should as well be aser b'hana? Explains the Gemara, avodas chavim u'shviyes shnei ksuvam b'echad. Avodas chavim and shmita. It says it by both of those that anything that comes from it is aser b'hana. So davka those. B'chol shnei ksuvim abayim ke'echad ein melamdim. You can't learn from it. Avodas chavim hadamar, in the pasuk that we just quoted. Shviyas mahi, where do we find that by Shemitah we see the same thing? Says the Gemara, Yovel hi kodesh yelachem it's Yovel shvi holy to you ma kodesh teves es damav av shviyas teves es dameho. It grabs hold of the money, that even the money, even that which comes from the Shemitah, is as well aser beha no. Ima kodesh, asked the Gemara, teves es damav yoytz l'chulin. What do you mean? But when it comes to Kodshim, the entity itself goes l'chulin. Av shviyas, we should say the same thing. Teifes dameha v'yotzas l'chulin. It should go l'chulin. Tamaloi mar tiyeb av yasei tiyeh. So a special din by Shemitah, similar to avodah zara, that the entity itself retains its din of kedusha as well as the money that it was transferred onto. Ketzad, what's the case? If someone utilized the peiros of shviyas and he bought meat with it, elu ve'elu misbarim b'shviyas, they both have to be destroyed with shmita. B'basar dagim. Similarly, if someone purchased with the peiros, then someone went and used that meat and bought with the meat b'basar dagim, yatzar basar v'nechnasu dagim. Now the fish has the shmita. Bedagim yayin, you sold the dagim and you bought yayin. Yatu dagim nechnas yayin. Now the yayin has the kedusha shmita. Beyayin shemen, then you buy oil. Yatu yayin nechnas shemen. So as you realize, the kedusha of shmita keeps on transferring. Ha ketzad. So what do we do? How does this work? Acharoin nitvas b'shviyas uperi atzmai aser. So we have this unique din by peri shmita, which parenthetically is the reason why one has to be so careful with Kedusha Shviyas. As we're seeing that the Kedusha keeps on transferring, and the peiros themselves become us. So therefore, for example, and this is halacha l'maisa, if someone goes to a store which doesn't have a hechshel, let's say in Eretz Yisrael during the year of Shemitah, and they buy peiros Shemitah, so the peiros themselves are aser. But not only are the peiros aser, but the kedusha goes on, and the money itself is going to be transferred. Now, from that money, something else is bought. That item will get the kedusha shvita, and that's the reason why you're going to have a big problem. And that's the reason why, if there's a store that sells peiros shmita, you're going to have an issue even to buy other items and to get change, etc. As the kedusha of shmita keeps on transferring. Now, whether this is fully applicable, because it could be certain entities have certain kulas involved that we might not be seimech on them, but at least for this level, perhaps but we're seeing how Chomer Shemitah is. So says the Gemara, okay, so now we have a Makar for Avodas Chavim, we have a Makar for Shemitah, that it transfers. And therefore, Shtei Ksiva Mein Kachad, Ein Malam, but everything else in the Torah, like all the entities in our Mishnah, if you sell them and you Mekadesh and Isha with the money, it will yes work. Ha Nichleman Damar, as every Gemara classically says, Ein Malamdin. Elman Damar Melamdim Ma'igel Ameimar. What about the Man Damar that holds Shtei Ksiva Mein Kachad? You could yes learn for him. So says the Gemara, a new Makar for the din of the Mishnah, that if you sell any of these entities, you could be mekadosh with the money. Miyutik ksiv is a special miyut. Ksiv hacha, it says over here, kicherem hu ksiv asam yovel he in midi achrini loy. Only these entities have the din by the zara that it transfers and the money itself retains the kedusha, but nothing else. And that's the reason why all the items in our Mishnah, in as much as they are asar b'hana, but if they are sold, that which it's sold for, one could be Mekadosh Nisha with, as the Kedusha will not transfer onto the money. And we continue with one last Mishnah, dealing with different entities that one can, yes, use for Kiddushin. Ha-mekadesh be'trumais, be'maisrais, o be'matanais, me'chatais, efer chatais, hareza mekudeshes, afilu Yisrael. Even a Yisrael that has all these items, we have to figure out how Yisrael has Truma and Meiser, says these are entities that usually go to the Kayin, or other Matnas Leviim, or the waters of the Chatos, the ashes of the Chatos. In all these cases, halacha is, the Kiddushin is yes, chal. Amar Ula comes along the Gemara, quoting Shitas Ula that says, Toivas Hana Einoi Mamin. Toivas Hana is not Mammon. Again, what is Toivas Hana? A concept that we've had and will continuously have throughout Shas. Toivas Hana means the ability for one to choose which kohen he could give. One has to give a tenth to the kohen, to the Levi, etc. So that ability to choose, is that considered equity? Is that considered money? The fact that I could choose which kohen to give my 5 apples to, is that have a value to it? So says Ula, no. But clearly, what did our Mishnah hold? Clearly, our Mishnah held seemingly yes. As the Gemara now asks, and we'll explain, what about our Mishnah? Yisrael. So the Gemara is assuming, or I say better, Rav Abba in his kasha to Ula is assuming that the way that the Mishnah is working is, what does it mean? You're mekadesh and isha with the truma. It means with the toivas hana, with the ability that you have the right to choose which kohen to give it to. So clearly, seemingly, the Mishnah is holding that toivas hana is yes money, and Ula said no. So Amar lei, so Ula responds, the case of the Mishnah is not that you're being mekadesh isha just with the toivas hana. Hacha bi Yisrael shenaflo tvelim miveis avi imoy kohen. Over here we're discussing a Yisrael that received tevel from his father, mibeis avi imoy, the father of his mother, who was a kohen. So it sounds very complicated. It's really not so much. That every Yisrael could theoretically have a grandfather who's a kohen. Because let's go from the grandfather's perspective. Grandfather had a daughter, and that daughter married a Yisrael. So the kids, the grandkids, will be Yisraelim. So my grandfather could theoretically be a kohen, even though I am a Yisrael. So if I am a Yisrael and I inherit tevel from my grandfather who was a kohen, so what does that change? Because Savar, and the Mishnah holds, and any of the manas leviim that were not separated, it says if it's separated. So let's look, I know it's getting a little bit late, but let's look at the final Rashi of this Amid. Rashi explains, since you could, and they're waiting to give the truma and complete the work. Lakach. When a kohen himself has items, says Rashi, basic concept of all manas kohuna, he as well has a din to give it to a kohen. What do you mean the kohen has to give it to a kohen? He himself is a kohen. So the answer is, he has a din hafrasha. He has to separate it. And once he separates the 10%, he then keeps it because he's the kohen. But he has a din hafrasha. He has to separate that 10% and then he could eat it. So it's a little bit easier for a kohen to satisfy his obligation of giving trumos and meisers. Why? Because he gives it to himself. So says the Gemara, if a Yisrael's grandfather was a kohen, what did he have to do to enable those items to be eaten? Just separate it and keep it for himself. So when he bequeaths those items to his grandson, the grandson, what does he have to do? Nothing, says the Gemara. Because any entity which is fit and right and waiting to be separated truma, it's as if it was done. And therefore, when that grandkid, the Yisrael, is mekadesh the isha with that truma, that's why it works. Because it's as if it was already taken care of. Says the Gemara, and that's what the din of the Mishnah is. As Rav Chia bar Rav Meir Rav Huna, Toivas Hana, Mammon, Einai Mammon. Okay, we just took on that our Mishnah Toivas Hana was Mammon. The Gemara answered that no. Ula says it's not Mammon, and there's no kasha from the Mishnah. But now comes along Rav Chia bar Ravin, and he asks Rav Huna Lamaisa, what is the status with Toivas Hana? Is it Mammon or not? I'll bring you a raya. Our Mishnah, so seemingly it's a raya. It is Mammon. No raya. There is no raya that Toivas Hana is Mammon. As we turn over to Nanchasa Bebeis, Rav Huna responds, at you are Hoitza. Ichsifhu. You should be, you are Hoitza. Rav Chia became embarrassed. Hu Savar, he thought, Mishmaita, Kamarle. He thought that when Rav Huda said that he was Hoitza, which means removed, that he was removed from the subject, that he was wrong. This is what I meant to say. Ravasi de Utsal koi kavosech. Ravati from Hutzal Hoitzahu. He holds like you. So says the Gemara Nema Ketanoi. Let's suggest that this topic, whether Toivas Hana, the right of one to give the matnas kuna to the kohen that he wants, let's suggest it's a machlekes Tanaim. As follows, Gemara Nadarim that we've seen. If someone steals the tevel of his friend, what's the halacha? Meshalim like to make tevel shel chaveirei. Divri Rabbi Yisrael Rav Yehuda Omer eina meshalim ela demei chulin shabai. You don't have to pay the value of chulin of it. So my love, what is this machlekes that when you steal the tevel of your friend, how much you pay? Suggest the Gemara. You know what the machlekes is? Demar savar. Let us suggest that Rebbe holds, when Rebbe said you mishalim demei tevel shel chaveirei, you have to pay the value of tevel, meaning even the truma that was within the tevel. Again, if there's 100 items, 10 of them are going to go to the kohen. So if I tell you have to pay demei tevla, you have to pay for all 100, including the truma. So demar savar Rebbe also has mammon. Therefore, you have to compensate even for the truma when you pay back that which you stole. Mar savar. Whereas the Rebbe Yehuda holds no. Therefore, you don't pay for that. All you have to pay is for the 90 apples. Says Gemara Loi, that is not the machlek. It's kol yama Toivas Hana. Everyone agrees einay mammon. Gufa, our din that we explained our Mishnah, is that din conclusive? That when something falls from the grandfather, is it considered that it was taken off and it could be used right away or not? That is the machlekes. That what explains the Gemara. Mar Savar. Rebbe holds Kamisha Hor Madamya, therefore you have to pay for the whole value. Mar Savar Lav Kamisha Hor Yadamya. First way of explaining. V'yibai Seim D'Kol Yam Kamisha Hor Madamya. V'Toivas Hana Einay Mammon. V'Hacha B'Dishmuel Kamifliki. And you know what they're arguing about? They're arguing about Shmuel. Damar Shmuel. Teaches Shmuel, Chita achas b'teres hasakri. Shmuel says on a deraisa level, really one chita, one single grain stalk, parters up the whole kri, the whole pile from truma. So the Maris lay Shmuel, Rebbe holds of Shmuel, and therefore you have to pay for the whole value because you could have parted up with one chita. And Rebbe Yehuda Amar Leslie, the Shmuel answer number 2. Viba Yisema, we're on the first wide line, says the Gemara, third answer. Kol me Amar Leslie Shmuel. V'achenu taima de Rebbe, de kansur rabbanon liganov. Rebbe says no, nothing to do with anything we're talking about. It's stam a kinas. Viba Yisema, fourth answer to Kol me Amar Leslie Shmuel. A different kenas. You know why? We don't kenas the ganif, we kenas the balbayis. Why did you have items sticking around in your house that were not separated, the appropriate shumais and maisers? We conclude the parak with a classical stira from our Mishnah to another Mishnah. Tanan. We learned in the Mishnah, Hamakadesh, B'chumas u'maisis u'matnas u'mechatos ve'fer para, reason mekudash as aval b'Yisrael. Ve'raminu will ask you a stira, noital, schar lodon din of betilim. Someone takes wages to dan a din, the din is batal, laheyed, if he takes wages to testify, he do so batala. Lahaza isu l'kadosh meimav, if someone takes wages for sprinkling l'kadosh, to mixing the meme of the water, meme ma'ara, his water is like meme ma'ara, water of a cave, and it doesn't work. Ve'ifara ifra makla, and it doesn't work. So what do we see? We see that the Mishnah seems to hold that the ashes of the para aduma, you cannot get any benefit from it. And our Mishnah seemingly held you could. Amar Abaye lo kasha kam b'schar haba umil. Excuse me. Amar Abaye lo kasha kam b'schar hava umiloi. Our Mishnah about you got reward for carrying and drawing the water. That is mutter. Why is that mutter? Because there's no actual tircha in such an act. Kam b'schar hazav v'kidosh. Whereas the other Mishnah that says you can take the wages is the schar of the actual sprinkling and the actual mixing of the waters. Dekanami, and it's precise. And therefore it points to the fact that the schar is being taken for the act of hazah and the act of kiddush. Shema mina, and that's when you cannot get benefit from it. Hadron aloch ha'ish mekadesh. Incredible parak, a bit of a difficult parak, and Emer Hashem will pick up for the new Mishnah the next year. B'siyata dishmaya.